Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you with us as we guide you through a really profound analysis of a timeless, powerful message about human connection. Today, we are focusing on unity and affection, which is a summary of the original Hindi book, Ekta or Atmiyata Ki Sara Sadbhavna by Pandit Shriram Sharma Acharya. The core message we're exploring here is actually quite simple, but incredibly deep. True spirituality unites, it never divides. So let's embark on this journey of understanding together. Right off the bat, before we start unpacking these incredible concepts, it is absolutely crucial to establish exactly where this wisdom is coming from. This entire explainer is based strictly on the original Hindi literature by Pandit Shriram Sharma Acharya ji. We're totally bypassing any secondary interpretations today and going straight to the source literature itself to deeply understand a spiritual and, frankly, a very pressing social issue. Okay, let's just dive right into the foundational philosophy here. I want you to picture the continuous, universal flow of a massive, majestic river. The ancient sages of India gave the world this breathtaking vision, Atmavat Sarvabhuteshu. Now that translates to seeing oneself in all beings. They didn't just look at humanity as one collective group. They literally saw the exact same soul in every single living creature. The ultimate spiritual truth is universal equality. It's this grand, unifying vision that really forms the absolute bedrock of true spiritual philosophy. Moving into Section 1, Divine Ideals versus Social Reality, the great contradiction, because at the end of the day, philosophy means nothing if not practiced. So we've got these towering, beautiful spiritual ideals, right? Yet historically, the reality on the ground has been severely fractured by things like casteism, untouchability, and these incredibly rigid hierarchies. You have to ask, how did a culture that coined the absolute highest ideals of unity end up with such a deeply divided society? Well, the literature draws a really piercing comparison to help us wrap our heads around this. Historically, racial prejudice in places like the West was tied to differing levels of historical, educational, or cultural development. And crucially, as those marginalized groups educate themselves and progress, that discrimination actively fades away, it dissipates. But in stark contrast, Indian untouchability is rigidly birth-based. It's a lifelong sentence. A person born into a marginalized caste remains untouchable in the eyes of the orthodox, completely regardless of their personal merit, their education, or their character. The source text makes it clear. It is, frankly, a stain on our culture that must be washed away immediately. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the core tragedy of this whole system. The literature stresses a fundamental truth. A person's true worth is determined by their actions, not their birth caste. Yet what happens? Highly intellectual, moral, and spiritually elevated individuals are despised purely because of the family they happen to be born into. Meanwhile, on the flip side, someone of a quote-unquote higher birth might be completely lacking in character, but they're still granted all this unearned respect. It's a complete and total inversion of true justice. Merit transcends the boundaries of birth. Let's ground this in some hard reality for a second, because this is where it gets shocking. The original literature highlights a staggering statistic. Roughly 1/3 of the Hindu population has historically been forced to live as outcasts, enduring a genuinely marginalized existence. Just think about the sheer math of that for a moment. A society cannot stand strong while crushing 1/3 of its own foundation. That is a massive, massive portion of a society's potential, its strength, its intellect, just completely wasted and cast aside by its own people. Which brings us to Section 2, the hypocrisy of untouchability, a blind spot in compassion. Because it's so true that we criticize the world but ignore the darkness within. You know, we as a society are incredibly quick to criticize other nations for their racial or political injustices. We will loudly condemn the rest of the world for human rights violations, yet we somehow fail to look at our own actions and the deep suffering we inflict on our own people. Think about it. This is a society famous globally for its supreme nonviolence. People will meticulously feed ants and insects. They will worship cows, dogs, even snakes. Yet, incredibly, this very same society turns around and completely despises its fellow human brothers, literally denying them basic dignity and touch. Compassion for creatures, yet cruelty for brothers. How can a society that is terrified of hurting a tiny insect justify inflicting endless mental and social torture on millions of human beings? The contrast there is absolutely staggering. We are constantly reminded of our boldest spiritual claim, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, meaning the entire world is one family. It's a beautiful phrase, right? It's often repeated on grand international stages, but the literature asks a really piercing question. How on earth can we claim the whole world is our family when we won't even let a segment of our own local community step inside our homes or our temples? A true family does not practice untouchability. Now into Section 3, Consequences of Social Division, the price of prejudice. Because as we know, a divided house will inevitably collapse. Listen, this isn't just some abstract philosophical debate. This has had devastating historical and demographic consequences. Look back at the ancient era, when the society was progressive and lacked this rigid untouchability. It expanded globally. Even powerful foreign kings proudly embraced the culture and the philosophy. But flash forward to the modern era, and because of this rigid caste cruelty, millions have been driven away. Huge portions of the population converted to other faiths, and not just by force, but willingly, just to escape the daily humiliation that was being inflicted on them by their own society. Truly, narrow-mindedness erased our global footprint. But here is perhaps the most painful, mind-boggling irony that the literature exposes. The text explicitly states, the moment an outcast converts, they are suddenly embraced as an equal by the exact same society. Just pause and think about that for a second. A person is treated as untouchable their entire life, but the exact moment they leave the fold and convert to another religion, suddenly, poof, that impurity vanishes. The very same Orthodox society will now sit with them and treat them as equals. It completely proves that untouchability is entirely irrational. It is the ultimate illusion of purity. And look, this kind of irrationality, it's brought us to the brink of some very real, tangible threats. Millions have been forced out simply by social rejection. The literature warns that foreign missionaries are actively working at lightning speed. And here's the kicker. They aren't targeting the privileged. No, they are targeting the exact people that society has discarded and oppressed. If this continues, there is a very real threat of the majority actually becoming a minority in its own land. Essentially, we are pushing our own family out the door. Section 4. Call for true spiritual unity, embracing our own, because quite literally, the time to awaken is now. But here's the good news. There is absolutely a path forward. The literature doesn't just point out all the flaws, it offers an urgent, compelling solution. These destructive practices of the past must end immediately if the society is going to survive and thrive. The original text insists, uplifting the oppressed is the upliftment of the entire society. Empowering marginalized communities isn't just some nice act of charity or pity. It is the only mathematical, spiritual way to build a powerful, resilient, and organized society. You simply cannot be strong if a third of your body is paralyzed. Our strength lies entirely in our unity. And this directly impacts how the rest of the world looks at these ancient teachings. The unparalleled greatness of our spiritual philosophy remains hidden behind the stain of social prejudice. You can have the most advanced, towering philosophical concepts of universal oneness, sure, but the world is never going to respect them as long as we fail to treat our own people with basic human dignity. The world watches our actions, not just our words. Let our actions match our divine philosophy. So, as we approach the end of our explainer today, let's quickly summarize the absolute core takeaways from the original literature. The path forward is crystal clear. 1. We must eradicate birth-based discrimination entirely, no exceptions. 2. Provide equal social and religious rights to all. 3. Practice true spiritual brotherhood in our daily actions, not just in our theoretical debates. And 4. Unite to build a resilient and powerful society. Summary: true spirituality is unconditional equality. It's not just a nice thought, it is the absolute only path to survival. Which brings us to a really profound, lingering thought to close out our time today. I want you to deeply reflect on this question, which is directly inspired by the literature we just discussed. Are we finally ready to live our highest spiritual truths, or will we let division destroy our legacy? I want you to closely consider how you view and treat those around you in your own daily life, because honestly, the future depends entirely on your answer. Thank you so much for joining me for this vital explainer, and until next time, keep seeking knowledge and keep building true unity.